Hello all, this is Dr. Dave Maslach, and I am talking to you about reciprocity.com, the sharing economy proofreading platform that I'm trying to build. The E is spelled with a 3. In this particular video, I really want to talk about a paper that we had recently published in Organization Science, or that was accepted for publications. Organization Science, one of the best journals in organizational theory. And really what I want to get into in this particular paper is what it's about, and then finally, what can you learn about the process of actually us doing this and working this through. So I'm a professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship. This particular paper took us probably combined at least 10,000, maybe even 15,000 hours combined of working on this. We all worked very, very hard on this particular paper. This is a combined work with myself, David Maslach, Juana Branzi, Klaus Rierup, and Mark Zabracki. We all, Juana and Mark there at the University of Western Ontario, and Klaus, he used to be there, and he is now in Germany at Frankfurt Business School. So I really wanted to talk about what's going on in this particular paper, why I think it's so interesting. There's a lot going on, so I might actually do a couple of videos about this because I think that it's pretty robust. There's a lot of stuff that's going on. In fact, it was like, I don't know, 71, even longer actually, 71 pages of really dense thought going into it. Was even longer at one point. It's substantial. So anyways, this paper originally started as we were trying to figure out how firms learn vicariously from other firms' failures. So how do managers learn from other firms' failures? And what we arrived upon over a series of years and working through this is that a central data set was making a really important difference to that particular industry. The medical device industry is all about the manufacturing of products, not drugs, intended for the diagnosis, treatment, and prevention of ailments in humans and animals too. So it's really all about thinking, how are they learning from others' failures? How are they learning from the technical problems that other people have? And there's a central data set. It's called a MAUDE data set. It's the manufacturer and user facility device experience data set. And this is all about failures. So basically anybody can contribute. It's typically manufacturers. I think it was about 90% of manufacturers that are contributing. So it's 90% of the records in this data set are from manufacturers. The rest is like users and stuff like that. But the way that it normally gets reported is that users report to the manufacturers, and they kind of look to see, okay, is this a problem with my device? If I think it is, I'm going to put it into this data set for everybody to see. And so there's millions of records in there, millions and millions of records in there of all these problems across the entire industry. It's very detailed. There's a lot of stuff going on in those records, but in general, they're pretty messy and they're pretty noisy, right? So if you actually go and read some of these records, some of them are detailed, some of them are really well written and stuff. But in general, a lot of people don't go through and read. They don't write in detailed manners. Sometimes it's really hard to actually read and interpret these things because they're written from the manufacturer's perspective and not as somebody like a layperson that's going to read that particular thing. There's all sorts of spelling mistakes. It actually was the inspiration of reciprocity, by the way, when I was looking through this data set. And what is important is that there's so much noise, there's so much what's called heterogeneity in these different records. There's lots of variance that's going on. And it's just looking at all the, they're all different, right? It's very different across the entire industry. And these firms, these manufacturers are actually learning from all of these different records. And so how do they do that? What's the interesting thing here? This is where we really struggled, because the literature and the way that we understand how people learn typically is that we understand in the lens of learning from success. So we know that manufacturers learn from other people's success. There's been a lot written about this. In fact, our entire field has been writing about this for the last 30 years. And other fields, there's all sorts of people talking about how people become successful over time. And the way that you do that is you model after somebody that is successful. So you look at ones that have a certain amount of status, for example, they're large enough firms, or ones that are indicative of what you want to become. And so you look at those particular firms and you model all the actions after them. You essentially just replicate what they're doing. And this sort of best practice mentality actually works quite well, but sometimes it does lead you astray because often you don't understand what leads to that success. And there's a lot of sort of uncertainty. There's a lot of luck involved. And we get kind of mixed up along the way and we start sort of doing things that are unusual that allow you to, and unusual that might not lead you to success, but sometimes it does. So it's often hard to identify what leads to success, but generally this best practice copying thing is kind of the standard in the way that people learn from success. But here we have a circumstance where you necessarily don't know who are successful, and you probably don't want to learn from the most successful ones because you need a sort of broad insight, right? You're looking for the objective of learning from failure is to learn about all the possibilities of failure, to open up your set of the possible things that could possibly go wrong with what you're doing. And so you have to look extremely broadly, right? Not just on the one little or the most prestigious firms or the most the largest firms, but you have to look really, really broadly because you're looking for all the things that can go catastrophically wrong. So firms are learning from all sorts of managers are learning from all sorts of different firms, even the ones that you're like, oh, they're terrible. Like they don't know what the heck they're doing. In fact, those are probably really good lessons to learn from those people that are really, really terrible from those particular people, right? Or from those particular firms, because you will learn not to do that kind of stuff of like, oh, you don't want to have that certain design of a device. You don't want to sort of interact with the Food and Drug Administration that way. You don't want to interact with your customers that way. You want to make sure that you are sort of doing things in the right manner and stuff like that. You have the right quality control. And so those things actually provide a lot of lessons. And so if you have this idea that you're only learning from success, then you're missing out those ones that are very sort of unusual, but they're just, they're poorly managed and they do provide a substantial amount of lessons along the way, right? So you have to look at those as well. So how are they doing that? And so we speculate, we asked, the managers and stuff like that are in this industry. And you know what? What's really cool is even though that people are openly disclosing that they have all of these problems in the medical device industry, managers love it. They really, really love it. So it's kind of a weird situation where they're openly disclosing these problems and they don't want to, but they do want to at the same time. I mean, the reason why they don't want to is because of the sort of negative reputation effects and, yada, 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 all those kind of things that people might, think that their device is unsafe and stuff, but they are openly disclosing. The reason why they're openly disclosing and putting things in there is they want to help out other people on other firms, because if they all are sort of learning from each other, then they all benefit from those particular things, which is really cool insight. And the way that they're actually looking to see, so they have this very large noisy data set that they're learning from, and they're trying to learn from others, is they're looking at kind of thresholds of sort of where things kind of break down. They have in their mind if there's a firm that has 1,000 reported problems, we probably should pay attention to them. Or a firm that has, maybe 100 reported problems. Doesn't matter where they are in the entire industry, but those ones are really important to pay attention to. So we should probably look to see why that is occurring, right? So we look at those, and so they might be identifying sort of particular failure modes where things could sort of catastrophically go wrong. or they might be looking for things that are sort of protocol violations, where things where you're sort of doing, you're not abiding by what you should be doing, right? So by the norms of the industry or what's sort of governed in the industry, they're not abiding by those. And so they seem really unusual, and they provide a great case to learn from those particular events. There's so much going on in those particular events where you can actually learn from those particular things. And that's what they're trying to think through, is sort of like, oh, that person over there, that firm over there, they have a lot of problems going on. So to give you an example, I talked to one manager where they were in a completely different industry, and where they were in an industry sector that was completely unrelated to this. But when there was that sort of the problems with the Tylenol and the drug, where there was the tainted Tylenol containers, right? So they're telling the story of, okay, we were in this really obscure, different sort of part of the industry, but then, we had all of these issues going on with the tainted drugs or the tainted pharmaceuticals that we had to pay attention to. Ooh, we got to do something over here. They're doing like the stuff that's happening to them, where they have all of the problems with the seals on the containers of Tylenol. We have to do something. Sorry, I might be mixing up. It might be aspirin or Tylenol. I can't remember which one it was. Apologize. But anyways, we have to do something about that, and we have to design our packaging in a way to ensure that it's safe. And, they start designing their packaging in that way to ensure that the device is safe and can't be tampered with. So it is in a completely different area than the one that they were in. Let's say they were let's say they were a scalpel manufacturer over here, but then they see what's going on with all the problems with the Tylenol and the tainted containers of Tylenol, that they have to sort of redesign their packaging and think about it in a different way. So they have to look really broadly. They're not looking at all the same manufacturers, even the same technology, but those provide insights, and they have to learn from those particular events, right? So the way that they're looking at sort of thresholds in the industry of, okay, where are they sort of going to the sort of problematic areas. And that's because the reason why they're looking at thresholds is because there's so much noise that happens in the data set. So, if users are contributing, manufacturers are contributing, sometimes the manufacturers don't know if that's actually the cause, but they just contribute anyways, right? They just do anyways. And so there's kind of a baseline level of just noise that happens in the industry, is they're just from uncertainty. So they have to exceed that baseline where it becomes unusual. And those unusual events sort of drive the learning that happens, right? So coming to the story of, the development of this particular paper, right? It was really tough. What honestly was really tough and gave me a lot of inspiration. It helped me learn about the process of developing a paper, because this was pretty unusually long. It was a tough paper to get through the review process. We got it in fairly quick. Well, it took me, I think I was working on about 4 years before we submitted it. And it was pretty kind of a standard model in how we are understanding learning from failure. But then the reviewers really pushed back on what we were doing. And, it was a really good experience for us that they pushed back, because it forced us to really think about what was really going on. And they kept pushing back, had great insight all the way through from both the reviewers and the editor. And they kept pushing back and pushing us, making us think in different ways. And now we have this really robust paper from all of this peer feedback that we received along the way that we wouldn't have been able to get without that peer feedback. That peer feedback was very, very valuable for us to come up with this insight along the way. So it was great that people were pushing that. So there's a couple of things here that you should acknowledge and you should sort of think about, is that these things take a long time, especially stuff getting into the very best journals at this point. They take a long time. They take a lot of work. So there is, and that's because we're really conservative. Science is very conservative, especially in the top tier journals. They don't want to publish things that they don't necessarily trust, and that's a great thing, right? We want to make sure that they're very well vetted. The other thing is that science, and when we write things, it is very much this collective endeavor where we are trying to get feedback from others, and the feedback from others really helps out and sort of pushes us in different ways and makes us think in different ways without that feedback, right? So it's extremely collaborative. So I really wanted to think out and thank those people who actually helped us along the way. And, this is definitely a moment where my academic journey, my understanding of academia is greatly increased, and also really inspired me to create the thought process inspired me to create this website that I'm building, because I think it's actually very valuable to have this peer feedback along the way and be able to get peer feedback from even just random people out there that might be helpful, or maybe it's going to be somebody in a specific area that's going to be helpful. It's hard to get those people to contribute in a certain way, right? So that's what I was trying to think about when I was building Reciprocity, and then to sort of think about how do you clean these large data sets at the same time that have all this messy data. Well, you need something like this, some sort of collective endeavor that people can sort of participate and go on there and clean things up and make it sort of readable. And that's what my goal is with this, and whether it actually gets there, I don't know, but who knows. Anyways, I hope you really like this idea that we generated. I'm probably going to do a couple more videos about that in the coming weeks, because I think there's a lot going on in that paper, and we are inspired in so many ways from so many people along the way. And if you just, I put a link to it. You can look at all this sort of stuff that's going on. It was literally one of these papers that every single line, every single word we went through, and we thought about what it meant and what it was about. It was a real tough thing we were trying to think about. And we were condensing, literally in the paper, we were condensing, probably 100 pages, and we're condensing it to like 5, right? Like all of these ideas and knowledge, and we're trying to condense it into something really tight, right? So that's, so all of those pages, there's 70 pages. It's probably actually like, at the end of the day, there's probably 1,000 pages of ideas that we tried to condense there, and we really gave it a lot of thought and sort of went through. So we are really proud of this. Speaking out on behalf of my colleagues and co-authors here, we're really proud of this paper. So hopefully you do enjoy it. Hopefully you like this video. If you like it, make sure you do the old thumbs up. If you don't like it, that's fine. Hey, I'm okay at the same time. This whole virtual thing is not going to hurt us. So the other thing is, if you have any comments with the idea and what we're developing, what we're trying to do, you can put some comments below that sort of, that's very helpful for us and sort of getting our thoughts wrapped around all of this stuff that we're trying to do. And that's it. That's all I want you to do at this moment, or think about. Make sure that you do. I'm really looking forward to seeing you on the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye.